Enroll, check your details and vote. That is the message of today's OI podcast. Welcome to the OI podcast, the Otago Institute podcast, conversations with experts from the worlds of arts, sciences and Mātauranga Māori, brought to you by the Otago Institute, the Otago branch of the Royal Society for Arts and Sciences. Kia ora, no mai, haere mai, and welcome. I'm Dr. Barb, a quantitative ecologist with a background in modelling, climate change, biodiversity, conservation prioritisation and SciComm, with a PhD in botany from Ōtākau Whakaihu Waka, the University of Otago. Today's show is all about the Māori role. Enroll, check your details and vote. To vote in this year's general election, you need to be enrolled. It only takes minutes. Go to vote.nz. If you're Māori, you can choose between the Māori role and the general role. If you are 18 or over or turning 18 between now and Election Day, which is Saturday the 7th of November 2026, go to vote.nz to check your details. If you wish to be on the Māori roll, you have until the 6th of August to change roles before the 2026 election. Go to vote.nz to enroll or change to the Māori role. Being on the Māori role means you will have a choice of candidates for the Māori electorate that you're in. This does not affect your party vote. Remember, you can enroll anytime between now and midnight, 13 days before Election Day. This election, that will be midnight on the 25th of October 2026. Note, this is a change from the last election. So those three important dates are the 6th of August for changing to the Māori role, the 25th of October for enrolling, and the 7th of November for the actual election day. Today's episode is pre-recorded from last election with Christine Winters. Enjoy.
If it's your first time voting, good on you and go for it. And once you're registered, that's it. You're registered for life, more or less. So
more or less, yeah.
It's done now, so do it.
Yes, you're all prepared for all the elections upcoming, right through to the end of your life. But
there's always a but.
But it's not set in stone. So we will be talking today because we're particularly talking about issues that relate to Māori. So we will be talking about the general role versus the Māori role. And we will be talking about a little bit about Māori wards and a little bit about issues that are of particular importance to Māori maybe, and why it's really important for you to register and to vote, of course. So there, and to enlighten us on all of that today, we have Dr. Christine Winter from the Political Sciences Department. Thank you so much for coming along.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
It's so fantastic to have you here. And today, I have a karakia to start us off. Tuia ki ruka, tuia ki raro. Tuia ki waho, tuia ki roto. Tuia ki te haere, takata. Ka roko te pō, ka roko te ao. Homie, huie, taikie. Thank you very much for coming. I like that karakia.
It's a beautiful one.
And I kind of borrowed it from the ORC. It's the one they now use to start their meetings. And I like it because it's totally not religious. It's kind of a unite above, below, without, within, unite as one. Listen to the night and listen to the world. That's a lovely sentiment to start an action. And we can now come together as one. And we're coming together as one here to just discuss these local elections. I think that's a nice sentiment to start with.
It is. It's very grounding.
It's very grounding. And we're here. Now, Dr. Christine.
Nobody calls me that.
Don't they? What do they call you, Dr. Christine?
They don't just call me Christine. Or if they're family, they call me Chris.
Oh, okay.
Call me whatever you like, just don't call me late for dinner.
So a BA from Victoria University, honours from ANU and a PhD from Sydney. But now you're back here.
Yes, I am.
At Otago in the Political Sciences Department. And fantastic.
It is.
Did you originate in Dunedin?
No, I'm from Taranaki. I'm from Taranaki. That's where I was born and brought up. And then
I should let you give your introduction. Sorry, Christine.
You haven't.
I haven't. It's shocking
haven't.
of me.
It is.
I just jumped from one thing to another.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
Clearly you've got a mind that goes all over the place.
Yeah.
So, shall I do a pepper?
Yes, that would be lovely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, ko whakapunaki, te maunga, ko wairoa, te awa, ko takitimu, te waka, ko Ngāti Kahanunu, te iwi, ko Christy Minta Toka Wingawa. And I also have a whole bunch of English heritage. And those relatives came out on 3 different waka, the Waikato, the Kosipo, and the Castle Eden.
Crikey.
So,
The Castle Eden.
Eden.
Eden. Oh, sorry,
Eden.
Castle Eden.
Castle Eden.
Castle Eden.
So early settlers to Canterbury,
Right.
and then another lot into Whangarei, and then spread across the country.
Interesting. Interesting, but not unusual, I would say,
No,
to
I
have
think
that
pretty
sort of
typical.
mix of Pākehā and Māori, and that brings with it in itself complications and like questions about identity, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a complicated history, and it is a contestable sort of history. You know, you're colonist and colonised, you're settler, you're abused, you're abuser. You know, it's really, it is complex, and navigating it is a constant piece of work, I would say. Yeah.
Like a tricky kind of mental reflection that's ongoing throughout your life almost.
Absolutely. It's never one thing or the other. It's different things in different contexts, I suppose, and trying to marry the two worlds in some way that leaves me at peace.
That can be challenging, yes, most definitely. And I think that's reflective of any history. Like we never totally weave all the aspects together. And you're right, it's a reflection of time and place, and
And who we are. And I guess throughout our lives, there's different points where it's more important and we go into that reflective space more than others. Like sometimes we just kind of get on with life and we're doing whatever we're doing. And then sometimes there's some point, maybe when you have your first kid or when particular elders pass or, and I'm going to come back here to the political, when you first register. Because when you go in to register to vote, which is easy, I must say, go to the website, it's vote.nz. It's a really easy thing. It takes 5 minutes. You don't need any identity. You just go in, you say you obviously need your own identity, any...
Identifying documents.
Identifying documents, thank you. That was the clarity that I was looking for there, identifying documents. Of course, you take your own identity in. But you don't need identifying documents. It's literally 5 minutes. So you go in, all you need to know is your address and your name and possibly your date of birth. Even that I'm not entirely sure of, but you do need to know your address because that determines which electorate you go in. You don't need to know which electorate you're in. Anyway, what I'm saying is when you do go there, you do get asked this question. Which role do you want to be on? The Māori role or the general role? And that can be quite confronting for some people. And,
It is.
And I think really it almost could be a barrier to people registering because it's something they feel like they need to have thought about a lot. It's not so simple as just going in and entering things. And I wanted to hear your like when I did it, I don't whakapapa Māori, so there's no question. I go on the general role. It didn't take me any thought or any mental reflection or decision making. Why should I go on one or the other? What's the difference? Why do I need to make a decision? But that is a decision, and it can be, people who've struggled with this mixed identity. It can be something that maybe brings up lots of feelings that you have to think about.
Yeah,
and I
sure.
wondered if you could talk through.
Yeah, I can talk about my own experience, which probably is moderately useful. So I was on the general role when I first voted. which would have been when I was at university in Wellington back in the olden days, in the 70s. And then some years ago I left for Australia, so I spent 25 years in Australia, and I remained on the general role over that time. And when I came back here, which was only 3 years ago, 3 years and 2 months and 3 days ago, that we came back. So then I decided to make the decision. You know, I'd just always slipped the pieces of paper away and thought, I don't want to think about this. But coming back, I thought, no, come on, you've got to think about it. Which role is actually going to serve Māori best? Are we best represented by a politician who has to consider all the members of his electorate or her electorate, no matter what their heritage? Whether they are a Māori MP or not, they still have to think about their whole electorate. Or do I want an MP whose primary focus, their laser-like beam, is going to be on issues that affect Māori? And I thought, that's what I want. I felt coming back was just after COVID, when there seemed to me to be a rise in anti-Māori thinking. Some pretty nasty stuff going on, both, I think, within politics and in the community. So I wanted somebody who was going to represent Māori specifically, hence my choice to go in the Māori role. Now, there's a second reason, and that is the more Māori on the Māori role, the more representation we get. So if the Māori role diminishes, if it gets smaller, we will lose politicians who are there simply to represent Māori needs, wants, desires, futures. So the more of us on the roll, the more representation we get. And that seems to me to be very important.
And that's an interesting point, because it means that simply registering to vote, not even voting, but being on the roll, registering and ticking that Māori role is actually a political act in itself. And doing that is actually very important.
What the listeners can't see is that I am nodding my head furiously in agreement with Barb.
Yeah.
So it is a political act. It is. It's a considered act. It is a strategic act. And I think in a time of very tactical politics that can turn on a dime because somebody suddenly has some whim of some sort, to actually take a strategic approach to your political future is important. And just to your future is important.
Because, of course, politics touches us everywhere.
Yes.
In all aspects of our life. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people, they sort of put it in a separate box. But and I think it's to me, it's something about the way we talk about government, as if
it's separate from us, but it's not.
Yeah, and as if government
or the state. Yeah,
and also as if government is always the same thing, because it changes every election. The government changes, and that means that it's a weird sort of thing. But I don't know how to really say that, but it's important to realise that decisions about health spending, housing spending, school spending, road spending, all those economic things, where we're putting our emphasis, and the environment, all of those things, how we value all of those things, all is driven by government, and by government at all levels. So the central government, which is what we have a little bit been talking about, but also by the regional government, so the Otago Regional Council for us here, or the DCC for us here in Dunedin or Queenstown Lakes, wherever you're, Dunstan, Central Otago. But for us here, it's the DCC at that very local level and the regional government, the Otago Regional Council, and then the central government. And I think one thing that's become over the course of this election series very clear to me is the interaction between those and the power of local government and regional government to affect central government and vice versa. So there are a lot of things that come down, and I think that having that whole election, that idea of politics, it's a lot to absorb all at once.
It is. I want to pick up on one thing that you said, and then I'll more directly engage with your observations. You talked about all those economic things. Government is also responsible for a whole bunch of social things. And I think that is something that is getting lost from the discourse, getting lost from the conversations that we hear, particularly from central government and increasingly from some members of local government. So our general well-being is overseen by government in the sense of us having access to the sorts of resources that make life worth living, that allow us to flourish. You know, if we reduce the amount of money that is available to our health services, for instance, and then say the health services aren't working within their budget, what we're talking about is people's well-being. We are saying this government places money at a much higher level of consideration than they do people's welfare, people's flourishing. And the same with education, the same with social welfare, the same with the environment, where we focus, and this is perhaps, I shouldn't be touching this hot potato, but I'm going to, if we think about this regulatory standards bill that is currently before the government, the idea there is it is going to place property always at the centre of government, and people are subsidiary to property. And that seems a bit skew-with to me. It seems to me that our governments should really be focused on what makes people flourish. And money is a component of that, but it's not everything. And if we look around the world at the countries where people are happiest, where they are flourishing most, it's countries where they have, believe it or not, high tax rates, but superb social services.
But what's added to that is that law, which are enacted by Parliament or the King puts his final say on it or whatever, you know, that's codifying social behaviours, codifying how we expect people in our society to behave. And I think that added to what you've just said about what comes first, people or the money. It's always got to be people. We've got to I think people, because they like to separate government out, they forget that that's actually telling us how they expect us to behave in certain circumstances. Yeah.
So when they legalise protest, for instance, that removes our voice, that removes our ability to influence government in a way that is separate from voting, and to tell the government what it is that we want and need to flourish.
And even if you don't agree with the form of protest, I do really worry that if they're going to limit protests, then, you know, you can't deny one voice at the expense of something else. No. And I think,
if you're going to allow business to lobby, you've got to allow the people to lobby via protest.
Exactly.
And I just want to bring this back to the local elections because you touched on there with taxes. And, of course, Finland is the classic example where they not just have high taxes, so they have about 50%.
Yes, it is 50%.
Taxes. But it's not just that they have taxes, it's that the people genuinely are happy to pay the taxes because the upside of, like, taxes, it's a balance between what you get and what you've socialised and what you pay. And when you pay higher taxes, you have more money to make sure that your society is more equal.
It allows equality.
It allows all that equality to come out, and it allows a certain base rate in education and health. And health, and those things that directly affect our lives, where if everybody has the same standard at that base level, then people can reach their potential. And that is one of the founding things of New Zealand. Like, people came here to get away. Colonisers, the white people, came here to get away. We don't really know why the indigenous Māori came here in the first place. Do we?
Probably not directly, but there are certainly implications that there was overcrowding on some of the Polynesian islands, but also, sense of adventure.
Exactly.
And that sense of adventure probably had a bit to do with quite a lot of our white forefathers, but also there was definitely a getting away from that inequality of having a rich aristocratic,
absolutely.
I would say.
Absolutely.
Anyway, the society that we have is one that we build, and we hope that then gets reflected in our politicians, I would say. But I just wanted to say that thing with Finland, that comes back down to local elections as well, because there are people every election at every level who will campaign on less tax, tax breaks, or rates. So rates is this in the local elections context. It's the same thing. It's rates. So what level we want our rates to be at is actually a decision that we're making, and it's not just about the money. It's about what the money gets spent on. So if we pay fewer rates, that affects.
What are we going to give up?
What are we going to give up? What do we lose?
And that is never asked.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, no, I was just going to say, I think that both at local DCC and at regional council, there's a very big question there. And it's not just about what rates we pay, but how those rates are paid by different people in society.
Okay, so you're
so
talking
the balance
about
of
a regressive tax system where the more you earn, the more you pay, because every dollar that let's say you're on $30,000 a year, $1 is an incredible portion of that, whereas if you're on $200,000 a year, $1 is insignificant. So yes, you have a regressive tax system that accounts for those differences, the value of the individual dollar that's being taxed. There are a couple of things here. I'm old, and I can remember the days when tax rates were at 78% for the top marginal rate, and my father had to pay that rate. He never once complained. It didn't bother him in the slightest, because he could see what good was coming from that. We had something called, and you might not even remember this, something called the family benefit. Every household with a child got a certain sum per child, and that ensured that they were well fed. It ensured that they had shoes. It ensured that they could afford their school uniform. They could go on school trips. It just meant every child had a base level of access to resources, no matter what their family was like. Unless, of course, their dad went off and drank it. But, overall, the government was showing that it cared about children's welfare.
So that means, society cared about children's welfare, because the government's just a reflection. And you could capitalise your family benefits, so you could get a lump sum if you want to put a deposit on a house or something like that. And it wasn't means tested, everybody got it.
Everybody got it. So that was an equalising force, but also an investment in our children.
Exactly.
And likewise, when I went to university, my father still received my family benefit. Plus, the government paid a whole bunch of my fees, my allowances, my living away from home, and all of that. It was a demonstration of the government's commitment to the future. Whereas the focus now seems to me to be very much on today. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 3 years, the election cycle, but it's not really forward-looking. And that, it sort of comes on when you say, okay, I want to pay fewer rates or I want to pay less tax, you have to ask yourself, what am I prepared to give up? And what sort of society do I want to live in? Do I want to live in a society where women and children are homeless? I was listening to Catherine Ryan as I was coming in the car this morning, and there was somebody talking who's done a survey of homelessness in New Zealand, particularly women's homelessness, and apparently there are more women who are homeless than there are men homeless, but it is the men that we see, and it is men that our policies are directed towards. So what sort of life does our community want for our children, for our women, for our vulnerable people? And what then does that mean about society? How does that reflect on how we all feel, I think? I think it's more than just, well, I'm all right, mate.
I think
There has to be more than, because if I'm all right, it doesn't mean to say the person next to me is all right. And if you want a good social, civil society, then everybody has to be some sort of rightness.
There's also lots of research out there that specifically addresses that, and the I'm all right people are better if everybody else is all right, because you get this whole extra level of people growing up in lower socioeconomic, people who are struggling, people who are desperate, and that brings about a whole
Ram raids.
a whole heap of things that we don't really want to have in our society. And if you remove a whole lot of those external forces which make that sort of society more likely, then you actually end up with a better society for everyone.
Yeah, you end up with a more cohesive society. Unfortunately, we can reflect back to the 70s with Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, and Thatcher saying...
Robert Muldoon.
And Robert Muldoon, yes. God forbid, I'd forgotten. Where you have Margaret Thatcher saying there's no such thing as community. There is only family.
Wow. That's pretty stark, isn't it?
It's very stark. She was talking to Women's Day, I think it was, when she made that statement.
Wow.
There is no such thing as community. Now, that, I think, has infiltrated our politics. It is part of
definitely.
the neoliberal politics. And until we, as community members, we as electors, put pressure back on our governments to think about community, whether it's local government, regional or central government, they are going to continue down this path of, your taxes, your taxpayer money, rather than looking at it in a much broader sense. And this is, of course, where Maori politicians have a great strength. We only think about, we don't only think about community, but community is important. We recognise that an individual can only be strong if their community is strong.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh? And it is. I disagree with Margaret Thatcher, obviously, for many, many reasons. But I think that definitely in Māori, Te Ao Māori, that is a very strong force. But I also think very much in a Kiwi sense as well. I think that she's read the room wrong there. But I think
certainly did at the time.
But I think we are in danger of moving more and more towards that.
So I think we've moved. Since
then we have moved.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. It's been the sort of a transformation of our society since the 80s through till now, and we're staring down the barrel of the consequences. Things like polluted rivers. I didn't ever have to think about whether I could dip my hand in a river and drink it as a child. And as I say, I admit I'm old. But, the youngsters of today know they have to ask, can I drink from that river or not?
Yeah, and that's horrendous.
Appalling.
It's appalling. And that goes directly to local elections because, of course, the environment is Otago Regional Council. That is their preview. So everything about environment comes under the Otago Regional Council, and it's a catchment-based one because it's not just Dunedin. It goes the whole. It's a bigger regional council, and this year they go to STV, which is the same voting system that we have for the DCC. So that's going to make everything simpler because you are just ranking across the board. For community, if you're in a zone that has a community board, if you're in the DCC, you're ranking for mayor, you're ranking for councillors, and you are ranking for the ORC. So and we had Christine, we had, of course you are Christine, we had Janine, we had Janine Hayward on the show to just go through those basics of STV. And she had a really simple phrase, which I love, and that's, if you rate them, rank them. And it's so simple. Put a number 1 next to the person who you think most has their values aligned with you and your values. And then rank them as you rate them. Just say, this is the person who speaks to me the most. This is the person who I think will represent my values the best. Number 1, this is the second person, number 2, this is the third person, number 3, and just go down in consecutive order until you feel like you don't know that person.
If you don't rate them, don't rank them.
If you don't rate them, don't rank them. Yeah. And that's really simple, I think.
Simple, it's lovely, actually.
It's a really clear, this is how STV is. You don't need to think about it anymore. And that's the beauty of STV, is that you don't have to do tactical voting. You just literally rank them as you prefer them.
You've used a really interesting word in that, and that is your values. And values seem to have lost a certain gloss. And I think that's because of the focus on the economic and the loss of focus on community, on people, on flourishing. But yes, if you just stop and think, what are my values? What is important to me? Well, I know the things that I would rank most highly. One is an environment that supports life, and by life I mean everything. I mean including the life of the maunga, the life of the river, the life of the soil and the land. And secondly, well, what sort of community does this person value? And if you could have that clarity as you go into your ruminations about who to vote for, yes, I think that makes it much, much easier. But I think for some people the only value now is how rich can I get, which to me is insufficient.
Because it's rich in monetary terms, and there's so many other aspects.
But I also think there's this weird thing I think it's called aspirational voting. So people vote for where they would like to be. Like, I have no problem admitting that I am not amongst the richest people in society, right? I'm not poor by any means. I'm comfortable, but I'm not rich. And I think that rich people should pay more in taxes and rates and everything, because by and large they have benefited already from the system. People don't just get rich because they're hardworking and amazing and geniuses. And, if the billionaires around the world have shown us anything, it is that these people are not wealthy because of what they themselves have done. And that's, it's a very common phrase. The easiest way to make a small fortune is to start with a large one.
Yes.
And that is very true. And I have absolutely no problem with people who earn, let's say $1 million. Every dollar after the first million is taxed at 99%. I have no problem with that, because no one needs to earn more than $1 million. That's ridiculous. And I am not in that bracket. And I think the top tax rate should be way up there in the 90s. If these rich Americans are going to come here and live in New Zealand and benefit from our society, they need to be paying into that. They need to be paying into the environment. And I think that is at every level. That's at DCC rates, local elections, that's at Otago Regional Council there, and it's at general elections. It's all the way through. And I think we should remember that when people say rates, and we like to talk about rates, local elections, it's a very big thing for both the Otago Regional Council and for DCC. But there's two things about rates. There's the average value, which is like coming from a stats background, that is totally useless because the average means nothing.
No.
Really.
No.
All it does is you multiply the average by the total number and you get the total amount of money that you've got in the bucket. But the way you fill that bucket can be widely different. And I would suggest that we need to fill it more from the richer end of people and less from the people who are struggling. And I actually quite strongly believe that general taxes, the first $30,000 should not be taxed. Because that's a huge difference to people at the lower socioeconomic end. And it also means that, I don't want it means like the first $30,000 across everywhere, because it means that that's just it's a small amount of chump change for the people at the end, but it's just everywhere. And they're still paying masses of taxes, and it's about balancing it up so that you have a tax system or a rate system that balances society, that is a force that's driving society in that direction, in the direction of equality, in the direction of everybody being able to realise their potential.
Yeah, I think realising potential is really important. I think that even the idea that university students are going to benefit from their education, therefore they should pay for it, is a very narrow way of looking at what a university education does for the country, for the businesses that go on to employ these people. It should be well supported by the government, because that supports, the goose that lays the golden egg. It supports business, it supports individuals, it supports society as a whole.
Can I just pick up on one thing there where you said it goes on for the people that employ these people, and I think even that, I think, is something that we've changed the way we think about university, because I don't think that university is or should be just vocational. It is a place where society it's just about our learning, it's about our growing, it's about our values again, and it's about how we think about things and how I don't think everything in university should be directly going towards someone getting a job or being employed.
I agree with you 100%. But a person who is educated brings with them a set of skills that an employer can then find useful. So I'm not suggesting that university education should be vocational, which is the way that the government is trying to direct our education system in the universities now. They've taken all research money away from the arts, humanities and social sciences. There's nothing there for us to pay for our research. We can't research into education outcomes. We can't research into environmental matters from a humanities or social science perspective. They're not supporting the young poets who could flourish in our society, or the authors or whatever.
And that also it goes back to what you were saying about protests and about the commentary on society, because, of course, poetry and writing and all of those skills are what allows commentary on society.
Absolutely, and it appears today that the politicians, particularly on the right, but also some on the left, have become very, very fragile. They don't want any form of challenge to what they are proposing. And a lot of, where do the lateral thinkers come from? Where do the critical thinkers come from? Well, they come from the arts, social sciences and humanities.
But hold on, I want to interject here, because you two are from a university background. It's not the only avenue of tertiary study.
Oh, no,
that's true.
So just for listeners out there where, there are lots of other avenues where you can still get those same qualities, those same values that you can bring to whatever you choose to do in your life. Yeah.
Look, I agree with you wholeheartedly. What a university degree does is it concertinas down into 3 years, something that on your own, while you're working full-time, for instance, you would perhaps gather over 10 years.
Yeah.
So
I'm thinking about politics or
yes, of course. There are lots
trades training, all that kind of stuff. Because I think this is kind of where some of the separation has come from. People pick on differences and then they kind of lever on that. So if people are talking about university education, it's, you should go out and then get a university education. Well, if we do that and diminish and don't recognise the value of other forms of education, then I think we're in that kind of impacts how we can have that cohesive society. I think we have to recognise that value comes from lots of places.
I think that more than that, value comes from simply having that diversity there and available, so that people are able to go where suits them, where they feel most comfortable being, and having those options available. And I guess where I'm coming from is I came through university very different, not very different, but a different level age structure to Christine, because I came through just as all of the subsidies for study had been removed and fees were coming in. So I came through as the first in my family to have ever gone on to tertiary. I'm the first to have finished secondary school. So I'm the first to have gone through tertiary education. And for me, that was very scary. And I worked every night of the week to pay my living expenses and to get enough money to pay for my fees. And that was a huge thing. And the idea of having that student debt was huge in my mind because it was such a huge amount of money in my lifestyle. And, and I think that is a thing that puts people off. And I think it's a thing that differentially puts people off going to university. We've strayed quite a long way from local elections here.
However, just to remind you that even though, and I'm just being a bit of a devil's advocate here, you could go to university when I'm probably the same age as you. When I was at high school, we were streamed. And if you didn't hit the top stream, you never got the opportunity to go to university. And I think that, that creates
a weird dynamic into society
as well. So, I don't think students should carry a lot of debt. Then there were a lot more opportunities in press.
I think it was about 7% of the population went to university when I did, and only 4% of women. So, it really depended on you having a family that valued education and or that you were lucky enough to be streamed into the right classes.
Or,
and you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, to be quite focused too. Like I never went because I don't know what I want to study and I can't afford not to be earning or stuff like that. So, there are, so access to free fees and it's about supporting people who might want to go, but and also supporting, and it's often women whose families don't think they should go, but you think that there should be benefit to go. And it does come back to local bodies. So just trying to bring our conversation.
Yeah, bring it back to local bodies, Trudy.
It's the same about investment in, what are we going to spend our rates on? There's lots of social activities that the Dunedin City Council does. And then around what we've talked about, the environment and the regional council and, transport that enables people to get to places, like there was quite a bit of work done once, like why are there no doctors in Corstorphine? Now, this is a long time ago and it might have changed, but, do kids not get access to doctors because transport's such a problem? All the city buses come into town. Sorry, city planners, because I could be wrong here. But now they're changing their routes. All that kind of stuff, which comes from your local bodies, which means you need to enrol, you need to vote, and you need to make that simple. Well, it's simple and not that it's easy, but that choice about what you said at the beginning, Christina, it's a political decision that you make about who you want to represent you, who's going to get the best for you. And if that for you it's on the Maori roll, then go for it. Crikey, I'm getting all political here.
It's a political subject.
So it is interesting. And I think that with the local elections, the Maori roll in the general roll, they don't make much difference because here in Dunedin, we don't have Māori wards. So we used to have wards in Dunedin where certain people just like the wards are just like electorates but on a smaller basis. So basically you would, in the Otago Regional Council, they're called constituencies, just to confuse things slightly more, but they're all the same thing. It means that you have divided up the populace based on something, whether it's ethnicity or space. And it's to ensure that a portion of the general populace, this is in layman's terms people, has a voice, right? So with the Otago Regional Council, we have 5 councillors in the Dunedin ward, which is slightly different from last time because we had 6 last time, but our population relative to the other parts of the Otago region has gone down, and of course Queenstown Lakes has gone up, so they now have another representative. And we have 1 fewer. But the idea is to make it so that across those wards, it's as fair as possible. So each person's vote proportionally has the same effect on the councils, right? So that makes sense to me. And where there is that and for the Otago Regional Council, because it's so focused on public transport and environment, it does make sense that across such a large region there's wards. There has been a lot of talk about the local, the DCC, about bringing wards back. There used to be wards. We now have community boards, which is a slightly different thing, and they have a role of advocating for their community, and they're all on spatial areas. So Peninsula, West Harbour, North Otago, Strathtyre, Saddle Hill, Mosgiel all have their own boards. South Dunedin doesn't have one, for kind of weird historical reasons. There are other parts like the student area, which is largely, North Dunedin, North East Valley there, where there's a lot of students. And we did have the chairperson from the OUSA come in, and the OUSA are very in favour of having a student ward. And the other thing that, of course, is on the books is Māori wards. Now, Dunedin doesn't have Māori wards at the moment, and because we don't have them, we are not forced into having a referendum on whether we want them or not, which I think is problematic to start with, because I think if everybody who has them has to have a referendum as to whether you want them still, then everybody should have a referendum even if you don't have them, because you may want to have them. Like either you have a referendum or you don't, in my kind of very fairness outlook. You can't just say, okay, we've got them, do you still want them? I wondered if you wanted to just say something about Māori wards. Of course, we don't. It's not at the moment. There may be a referendum on it. The DCC could decide to have a referendum on it. I don't think that I haven't heard an announcement of it as yet, but of course we're pre-recording this, so it may come out later on.
I think it's the same sort of answer as I gave about being on the Māori roll, is that it's important in a country that was founded on a principle of co-governance, on what many political theorists, and that's where my domain is, called pluriversality, where you have pluriversal values. You accept that there isn't only one way of looking at the world, that there are multiple ways of looking at the world. So we have Te Ao Pākehā, we have Te Ao Māori, we have these 2 different ways of looking at the world. And in a society that is fair, you don't say one is better or worse than the other. You accept that this is what people find valuable. These different ways of looking at the world are what make their lives worth living, that allow them to flourish. And therefore one should not assume a position of domination over the other. Now, if you're used to domination, having to share something can feel like being oppressed. the more that we create spaces for Māori voices, for Te Ao Māori, the more people can come to understand and hopefully accept that there are two different ways of looking at the world in Aotearoa, that we are based on the principles, the fair principles of co-governance. So Māori can govern for Māori, Pākehā can govern for Pākehā. And that there are areas where there are overlap, which comes now in places like the conservation estate, for instance. Then there needs to be a debate, a fair debate, where one does not dominate the other, but where Māori voices can be heard. And Māori wards provide that opportunity for Māori voices to be heard. As, you know, if we go back to the debacle in Parliament with the haka, you know, Māori were being Māori, but the Parliament has said this is not a place where you can be Māori. Well, that completely goes against this notion of pluriversality, of co-governance. I think it's short-sighted, is the polite way of saying it.
And so I think, given we don't have wards, when you're voting and looking at the candidates, then one of the things I'd be asking them is, how are you going to ensure that? How do we ensure that that voice gets heard? Because if I read what one of the mayoral candidates has said, I'm a bit nervous about how that voice is going to be heard.
Some of these thoughts about how they think about wards are important, how they think about representation, how they think about rates, how they think about not just what the average rates are, like we'll bring rates down or we'll make more rates, but
what's the use, the purpose of rates? What do we,
And also who's paying the rates and how that is allocated over. Because we do have a system where people who own more expensive property
pay more.
Based on the premise that they had more money to buy it in the first place. So
and capital gain, like they do, like properties go up, they go up everywhere.
No work for property. Sorry, I'll just put my teeth in. It's been a long morning. Capital gains is something that is irrelevant to your work or to your effort or anything else.
Exactly.
You just gain because of scarcity. Nobody can say that they deserve capital gains.
It's a funny system, isn't it?
It is a very weird system.
And it is a bit strange to talk about that in terms of the local elections. And of course, this is the local elections 2025. I think the important things are to really get in people's heads what the different elections within local elections. So the ORC they have the ability to think about public transport and the environment. And you need to think really carefully who on the ballot paper is going to encapsulate your values. Don't just write it off as it's not important, because if you feel strongly about the environment or public transport, then maybe the ORC election ballot is more important to you than DCC, which doesn't, of course, mean you shouldn't vote in the DCC one, but you need to really know who you're voting for in the ORC. And the same with the DCC. Like they control a lot of things: parking, housing, how we are represented as a community to central government.
Libraries, which is access to information. Swimming pools,
libraries,
access
play
to,
parks, parks, and
public
reserves,
toilets,
all that.
The arts that come down.
Street lighting, those sorts of things, yes,
Lots of things.
They're the things that make the city take over, really.
And of course the big one
water,
is...
of course.
I was just going to say as well. The big one, of course, is the water. So what we call three waters, which is stormwater, rainwater,
and
wastewater and drinking water. And, all of those things which are huge,
and very expensive. And because of the drive to lower taxes. Of course, we haven't been maintaining those services, so now suddenly it's you've got to face
it's expensive. Well, why is that?
Well, because you haven't been looking after it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You've been bringing taxes down. Not taxes.
We
rates,
should just
sorry,
do
wrong
it.
term.
A benevolent dictatorship. A free woman, I think, will resolve everything.
I think there's another thing in terms of both the local council and the regional council is the way that the current central government is framing the responsibilities of those two organisations. So the central government is saying that local government is getting far too involved in social issues. It should just stick to its knitting, which is, I think, water, roads.
Yeah, I find that a bit problematic as well because
totally
I think
problematic.
local politics is really where you're closest to community.
Exactly.
It's where you know what the community wants, needs.
And our specific community.
Absolutely. So it is problematic. And then, of course, we had Shane Jones saying earlier this week that the Otago Regional Council was getting in the way of, quote, unquote, my mines.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
So this is saying, well, central government can determine what happens in the regions regardless of what the local population wants. And that is very divisive. That is not thinking about what sort of society we are creating at all. It is purely about how much money can we extract from whenua. Not good, in my opinion.
That is all we have time for today. If you have enjoyed this episode, I'm sure you will enjoy the rest in the series of the local elections 2025. I will close out with a very quick karakia. Kia tau te rakamare ki ruka I ka iwi o te ao. Let peace reign on all peoples of the world. And I think that's a nice sentiment to close out with. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to the OI podcast, the shout out for the arts, sciences and mataranga Māori.
You can support this podcast by becoming a member of the OI. Check out the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences on Facebook or our website.
If you'd like to listen again to this episode or others from the series, look for the OI podcast on ORFM's website, oar.org.nz.
Brought to you by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, the Otago branch of the Royal Society of New Zealand.